Well, let's talk a little bit more about that sanctions issue with Maya Lester, who is a sanctions barrister. She joins us via webcam from Tenerife. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for your time. As more and more has emerged in the last few days, does all of it show that getting around sanctions is actually relatively straightforward?
Well, I don't think any of the revelations show that, and I certainly wouldn't describe it as straightforward. I mean, the law does clearly say that if you are a sanctioned entity or person, then it's illegal for funds to be made available to you and for any institution to either deal with your funds at all or facilitate dealing. And so I suppose the allegation in the papers might be that structures have been set up to try to circumvent and avoid those prohibitions, which also is illegal.
Right, that's interesting because another analyst I spoke to earlier this afternoon said clearly shell companies are being set up to get round this, and whilst we might be struck by the scale of all of this, that in itself is not particularly difficult thing to do.
Well, and it's not in its, I mean, it depends what one means, and I think it's difficult to, one mustn't jump to conclusions. Simply setting up a company is, of course, not unlawful, and even people and companies who are on sanctions lists can act lawfully, and so can their advisors, and so can financial institutions. So I think the devil really will be in the detail on this, and if and only if it is found that there has been some kind of intentional getting around of prohibitions in relevant areas, might there arguably be criminal activity here? Right,
so you're saying each individual case really is going to have to be looked at in its entirety as a standalone issue?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a sanctions lawyer. I deal with looking at sanctions measures every day. They are very difficult to read, very difficult to understand, and exactly whether someone or an entity engaged in sometimes quite difficult transactions is or is not on the right side of the law can be a difficult judgment call. So some of them may be flagrant, clear, intentional violations, and some may really not be. So I'm afraid it is a difficult one to generalise about.
Right. So it is highly complex then from everything you're saying, and who are going to be the people who are going to do the drilling down that you say is necessary?
Well, I mean, again, it depends. We're dealing with overlapping sanctions regimes. So sanctions are imposed by the United Nations internationally, by the United States, in which case it's their very active Office of Foreign Asset Control who will be investigating. Sanctions are also imposed by the European Union, in which case it's for EU member states to do their own investigations. And actually, I suppose it's timely to mention that the UK has a brand new Office of Financial Sanctions implementation designed to clamp down more on sanctions breaches and deal with investigations. So obviously they will have their plate full in their very first week of operation. But it's really for national authorities to look into information that comes to their attention. But it's also, of course, for individual financial institutions, advisors, lawyers, to deal with the compliance side, to advise their clients properly on whether or not a particular transaction or course of action breaches or doesn't breach sanctions.
Very interesting to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time. Maya Lester, QC, thank you very much. And just to remind you of